The CIA spent millions training a cat to spy on Soviets. It got hit by a taxi. The US government tried to nuke the moon. They hired Carl Sagan to do the math. And the military sprayed toxic chemicals over American cities and told nobody. These are the things they declassified recently, hoping you'd never notice. Today, I'm telling you everything. Let's get straight to it. Number 10, the CIA Magic Manual. The CIA hired a famous stage magician, not to entertain, but to teach spies how to kill without getting caught. His name was John Mulholland. In the 1950s, he was one of America's best magicians. The CIA saw his skill in deception and thought, perfect. They hired him to write a secret manual called Some Operational Applications of the Art of Deception. It was a guide to using sleight of hand for espionage, like sneaking poison into a drink at a party. The manual taught spies how to palm a tiny pill while shaking a hand or drop a powder into a glass while the other person is distracted. One classic move was the two-handed pour. You hold a drink in one hand and the poison in the other. As you pass the glass over, the powder goes in. The whole thing takes less than a second. Mulholland also taught spies how to secretly pass objects like microfilm to each other in public, using something as simple as a folded newspaper during a brief brush on a busy street. The CIA eventually ordered every copy of the manual destroyed. It was considered too dangerous to exist. For decades, everyone assumed it was gone. Then in 2007, a researcher digging through old CIA files found one copy that someone forgot to shred. It was declassified and released. You can now read a magic textbook written for people whose job was to quietly end other people, with polite chapter titles like Misdirection and the Concealment of Small Objects. Number 9, Project Starfish Prime. In 1962, the U.S. military decided to test a nuclear bomb in space. They launched a 1.4 megaton warhead 250 miles above the Pacific Ocean and detonated it. Scientists had predictions about what would happen. They were wrong about almost everything. The blast was far bigger than expected, creating an artificial aurora that lit up the sky from Hawaii to New Zealand. It looked like the sky was on fire. The explosion also sent out a massive electromagnetic pulse that traveled 900 miles to Hawaii and fried electronics on the ground. Street lights across Honolulu went dark. Burglar alarms blared. A microwave relay station stopped working. But the damage didn't stop there. The explosion created an artificial radiation belt around the Earth, a radioactive hula hoop around the planet. This belt stuck around for years, slowly cooking satellites in orbit. At least 6 satellites failed because of it, which back in 1962 was a significant chunk of all the satellites humanity had ever launched. The U.S. military shot a nuke into space, knocked out the power in Hawaii, destroyed multiple satellites, and wrapped the Earth in a radiation belt that kept killing more satellites for years. The project was officially considered a partial success. Number 8, the Voice of God Weapon. Imagine you are a soldier alone and suddenly hear a voice in your head, clear as day, telling you to surrender. You look around, nobody is there. This is the Voice of God weapon, and the U.S. military spent years developing it. The technology beams sound directly into a single person's skull from a distance. It works using the microwave auditory effect, also called the Fry effect, where pulsed microwaves are converted into sound by the human skull. The military's idea was to send voices to enemy soldiers, making them think they were going crazy or receiving orders from their commanders, or even God himself, to give up. While the exact operational use is unconfirmed, reports suggest the technology was seriously considered for use during the Gulf War to beam Arabic voices into Iraqi soldiers' heads. Researchers found the beam could be aimed so precisely that one person could hear a voice while a person standing right next to them heard absolutely nothing. The documents describing this research were classified for years. Today, a commercial version called the Audio Spotlight is used in museums and stores to beam audio to specific spots on the floor. It's the same basic idea, just used to sell you things instead of convincing you that the sky is speaking. Number 7, Operation Ivy Bells. The Soviet Union ran a secret military communications cable along the bottom of the ocean. It was pitch black, freezing cold, and hundreds of feet underwater. They figured nobody would ever find it. They were wrong. The U.S. Navy found it, partly because the Soviets put up signs on the shore warning fishermen not to drop their anchors in the area. Once the Americans knew the location, they sent in a submarine, the USS Halibut. Divers went into the freezing water and attached a massive wiretapping device to the cable by hand. For an entire decade, this device sat there quietly recording Soviet military communications. Every month, a U.S. submarine would sneak back, retrieve the tapes, and disappear. The Soviets had no idea. Then, in 1980, a former NSA employee named Ronald Pelton sold the secret to the Soviet embassy for about $35,000. He He sold a 10-year intelligence operation for the price of a used car. The Soviets sent divers down, found the device, and now it sits in a museum in Moscow. Pelton was eventually caught and sentenced to life in prison. Number 6. Project Azorian. In 1968, a Soviet nuclear submarine sank to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, 3 miles down. The Soviets couldn't find it and gave up. The Americans found it and decided to steal it. They built a giant ship called the Hughes Glomar Explorer. Disguised as a deep-sea mining vessel, it had a secret moon pool and a massive mechanical claw inside. The plan was to lower the claw 3 miles down, grab the submarine, and lift it up into the ship. The cover story was that billionaire Howard Hughes was mining the ocean floor. Nobody questioned it because it seemed like a perfectly normal, weird thing for Howard Hughes to be doing. The claw grabbed the sub, and they started pulling. It was working. Then, about a mile from the surface, the submarine broke in half. Part of it fell back to the bottom of the ocean, gone forever. But they did recover the front section, which contained code books, torpedoes, and the remains of 6 Soviet sailors. The CIA filmed a formal burial at sea for them, and the footage remained classified for decades. The whole operation cost about $800 million in 1974, roughly $4 billion today. The full details weren't officially confirmed until 2010. Number 5. The toxic town covered up by the U.S. Army. In the 1950s, the U.S. Army secretly drove through St. Louis, Missouri, and sprayed chemicals into the air. The chemical was zinc-cadmium sulfide. Cadmium is a heavy metal known to cause kidney damage, lung disease, and cancer. They did not spray it evenly. They specifically targeted low-income, predominantly black neighborhoods like the Pruitt-Igoe housing project, home to thousands of families. They also sprayed near schools while children were outside. The Army's official excuse was that these areas had the right atmospheric conditions. The spraying trucks were disguised as steam generators. The operation ran for years. Residents started getting sick. Cancer rates in those neighborhoods climbed. For decades, nobody knew why. When questioned in the 90s, the Army insisted the chemical was harmless. Then the documents were declassified. It turned out the powder was not so harmless. Some batches even contained radioactive particles. Lawsuits were filed and some were quietly settled. No one from the Army was ever held accountable. The official Army statement said the tests were conducted within the safety standards of the time. The sprayed neighborhoods still have elevated cancer rates, and residents only found out why when the paperwork was declassified. Number 4. The government's $22 million ghost hunt. In 2007, the Defense Intelligence Agency launched a program called AWSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program. It sent researchers to a ranch in Utah to look for paranormal activity. The place is Skinwalker Ranch, famous for UFO sightings, poltergeist activity, and cattle mutilations. The government funded a study of it anyway to the tune of $22 million. A big chunk of that money went directly to the ranch. Researchers set up sensors to track electromagnetic fields, radiation, and unusual aerial phenomena. According to participants, they were also documenting poltergeist activity, objects moving by themselves. The program was run through a company owned by Robert Bigelow, who had bought the ranch years earlier because he believed something weird was happening there. So, the government essentially paid a man to investigate his own haunted ranch. The program was shut down in 2012. Most of its findings are still classified. Released data suggests they found no easy explanations or definitive proof of anything supernatural, just a lot of confusing data. The existence of AWSAP wasn't publicly confirmed until 2017, 10 years after it started, and most people missed it because it was buried in a New York Times article about a different UFO program. Number 3. Project Pluto, the nuclear cruise missile. In the 1950s, the U.S. military decided cruise missiles weren't scary enough, so they designed something worse. The idea was a cruise missile powered by a nuclear reactor, not carrying a nuclear warhead, but powered by one. Project Pluto was designed to fly at treetop level at 3 times the speed of sound. Its unsealed, open-air ramjet engine sucked in air, superheated it in a radioactive core, and shot it out as exhaust. Everywhere this missile flew, it would leave a trail of radioactive fallout. The missile could theoretically fly for weeks. It flew too low for most radar and too fast for most interceptors. After dropping its bombs on multiple targets, it would just keep flying over enemy territory, irradiating everything below. The engineers built a test engine, and it worked. Then the military canceled Project Pluto in 1964. Not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. It was unstoppable. And what do you do with it when the war is over? You can't land it without contaminating the site. Your only option was to crash it into the ocean. Even by Cold War standards, this weapon was deemed too dangerous to use. Number 2, Project A119, nuking the moon. In 1958, the US government had a secret plan. They wanted to nuke the moon, not for any military reason, just to show off. After the Soviets launched Sputnik, an embarrassed America suggested blowing up the moon as a show of force. The project was called A119. The idea was simple: detonate a nuclear bomb on the lunar surface. Everyone on Earth would look up, see a giant glowing mushroom cloud, and know who was in charge. It was the most expensive flex in human history. They even hired a young physicist to calculate the blast. His name was Carl Sagan. The same man who later hosted Cosmos was once paid to figure out how to blow up part of it. But then the scientists realized a few things. First, a nuclear explosion in a vacuum produces no mushroom cloud, only a brief flash of light. Not very intimidating. Second, nuking the moon might make it permanently radioactive. Third, the public would probably not react well to the government blowing up the moon. So the project was quietly shelved. The plan was classified for over 40 years, and it wasn't declassified until the 1990s. Number 1, Acoustic Kitty, the CIA's $20 million cat spy. In the 1960s, the CIA looked at a cat, thought it was useless, and decided to fix it. The agency needed to spy on Soviet agents in public parks, so they suggested using a cat, and they were given $20 million for it. The project was called Acoustic Kitty. They took a real cat and surgically implanted a microphone in its ear canal and a radio transmitter at the base of its skull. The antenna was a thin wire threaded along its fur. The idea was that a cat wandering around a park looks perfectly natural. Nobody suspects the cat. It would sit near the targets and the microphone would pick up everything. For the very first field test, they released the cat near a park in Washington, D.C. The targets were 2 men on a bench. The cat had one job. According to some accounts, it walked directly into the street and was hit by a taxi. However, this is disputed. A former CIA director later said the equipment was removed and the cat lived a long life. What's not disputed is that the $20 million cyborg spy project was canceled in 1967. The declassified documents from the project describe it as having not been practical. That's it for this video. More on the way. Subscribe to catch them.